Hey guys, welcome back. It's Stephanie Scheller with another Business Owner Spotlight. I'm super excited. So as this Business Owner Spotlight thing is growing, I'm getting more and more people that I've never, ever had the chance to meet. And today we have another amazing person here. So I'm actually just going to jump right into this. David, welcome to the Business Owner Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
So David, for our listeners out there who don't know you, or maybe, the whole point of this is to find business owners who are doing something awesome, but aren't necessarily getting a whole ton of attention. So what is it that you do and how did you end up doing that?
Sure. So a long time ago when I was a kid, my father was doing some computer programming based on some research projects that were being done on the homeless for the University at Buffalo. And so when I was young, of course, impressionable, I'd watched what he was doing on the computer, and eventually I started mimicking it, and I was typing gibberish onto the screen. Of course, there was nothing really useful going on. But from then on, I was always pretty passionate about computer programs and how computers worked. And so my father made sure that I had what I needed at home to be able to start doing some computer programming. And by 12 years old, I was programming in BASIC and Quick Basic and writing some simple shells for one of the guys that my dad knew who had limited movement of his hands. And so I created a user interface where he could click to open his programs. And this was before Windows was mainstream and, DOS was still the big operating system. And then I got my first programming job while I was still in high school at 17. So I was doing software development for a small company. I automated and streamlined a lot of their processes, who actually happens to still be one of our customers to this day, which is pretty funny.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So I was doing computer programming in C++ there, and went to a startup after that, and wasn't very happy with the way that it was run. I could see mistakes that were being made, but nobody would really listen. And so I decided if I was going to kind of mess up my future, I wanted to be the one to do it. So I actually ended up joining a couple other people in a startup called InWorlds, and it was a 3D virtual world. And I was the CTO there. I did most of the coding. I did a whole lot of the interaction with customers, and basically got the pulse of people, figured out what they wanted, and then figure out how to schedule and implement it. So I did a whole lot of programming. I led teams there, did an awful lot of pretty advanced 3D work, physics and game programming and all sorts of fun stuff. Mm-hmm. And from there, as the business kind of went into maintenance mode, it was getting pretty boring. And I didn't want to just be in maintenance mode. I wanted to be building new stuff. And so I started Slidewave, which is a software consulting company, because the thing that I realized is that I've always been best at building software. That's my calling. And so we got a team of really, really good people here. We have senior level designers and developers, and we write software for everything from military training to there's a 3D medical scanner that we're all working on right now that hopefully is going to help to save feet and diagnose some things that are on the skin and injuries better than they can do now just by inspection alone, because doctors use their hands for a lot of this, and very subjective. They just kind of look at the leg, they look at the arms and try to figure out what's going on from the outside. And this is a sort of non-invasive, not x-ray way of taking a look at both temperature and sort of topology of a wound or something on your skin, and being able to see in a very objective way what's going on with healing. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And they can track it over time. And there's tools to do measurements. Because what doctors do right nowadays is pretty archaic. Still, they use like little rulers, and they try to figure out where the edge of the wound is and measure it. And if the two doctors doing the same measurement, we get two different numbers. And so we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen anymore.
So someone else put together the machine, you guys are writing the software, or you guys
That's
are
right.
doing
Yeah, so there's another company called Vitametrics working on the hardware portion of it, and we're working on the software portion.
Nice. So I have to ask, so you left one IT startup company, went to start your own. Do you ever regret leaving that IT startup? Did they become a big deal and you ended up missing out, or no?
Absolutely not. No. No, it was just, you could tell that there was a lot going on that wasn't exactly good for business. And so when I saw that kind of thing, I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset, because my mother worked, she did her own thing. She was a something totally different. She took care of indoor plants for like large establishments like malls and things like that. But she did it on her own. And my father was, even though he worked for the University at Buffalo, he was also sort of like more of a contractor than anything else. So I think my family's been entrepreneurial for a long time, and I've had the bug. And like I said, like every time I saw somebody doing something silly, it was like, hey, if I'm going to do something dumb, at least I can blame myself if I fail, not just going along with somebody else's idea and then walking off a cliff. So.
Right. And so if the business goes out of business, I have no one to blame but myself. I can't sit here and be like, hey.
Exactly.
Well, I know I don't want to get you to like badmouth anybody, but since this is a learning opportunity for a lot of our listeners, what were some of the things you saw that were kind of like red flag, need to move type of thing?
Just one of the bigger things is when you're not listening to your customers and your employees. That's a huge red flag to me. Your employees pretty much know how things are running. Especially if you're not into it day by day, and if you're not listening to what they're saying is the problem, what's the point? You're not really being a leader. You're just trying to be a boss. And so there was a whole lot of that. Without getting too deep into it, because I have a lot of my own mistakes too to go over, but it definitely taught me to be human with people, to pay attention to how both your customers, your employees, people that are working with you, contractors, how everybody's feeling about the situation, and just try to get the pulse of things and listen.
Nice. So how do you make sure, because this is a problem I see in a lot of companies actually, where they don't listen to their customers, they don't listen to their employees, and half the time it's because they don't know what questions they ask. They expect people to pipe up with information, and half the time it's just because they take it, they're like, I know better. But so how do you, if you learn not to do that, how do you make sure that you do listen to your customers and your employees in your business?
Most of the time you can tell when something's going wrong and when something's going right. It's all about attitude. So you're talking to a customer and they don't sound exactly enthusiastic, or they sound confused, so it's all about taking the small signals and then just being willing to open up in a conversation and saying, hey, is there something that we could be doing better? NPS surveys are always good. You can even do those manually depending on how many companies are sending out surveys to. You can say, well, on a scale from 1 to 10, how are we doing and what could we be doing better? Actually listening to, for me though, and from the employee perspective, listening to what people really need and noticing when somebody's not sort of on the top of their game, because if you're involved, you can tell right away when there's something wrong. You can just see it in somebody's eyes, you can hear it in their voice, and just getting at the core of the problem before it becomes a huge issue is major. And so I think for me, it's just been paying attention to the pulse, whether it's just by observation or actively reaching out and saying, hey, how are things going?
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you have your own mistakes that you've made and stuff like that. What were some of the ones you've made that you've learned from that you're like, okay, never doing that again? Yeah.
So one of the things at a startup that I was involved with is equity splits. And so I mentor for 3-Day Startup. I facilitated for 3-Day Startup. And so when people start getting into the money portion and the equity portions, I always have to pipe up on this one. 3-way, we had 3 business partners, and 3-way even equity split was like the dumbest thing that I've ever done. And it was me setting it up saying, hey, everybody's going to work exactly the same, and everybody's going to work really hard, and we're all going to really, kick butt at this. And that's how things feel at first. And then you get 6 months to a year into something and somebody just falls off the radar and stops doing anything. Yeah. You're sort of like, why didn't we have that equity for something else? Investment, somebody else that wants to work, things like that. So one of the bigger mistakes that I've made as a business owner is just poor equity splits, just assuming that somebody's going to pull their weight based on that rah-rah feeling that everybody has in the beginning of a startup. It doesn't it doesn't compute. And you also have to keep in mind what somebody's work schedule is going to look like not even for the next 3 months, but 6 months, a year, and 2 years down the road. Like, what does a person's job look like? Is it going to just disappear? Like, so that was a big one. I think another one is not getting the right people in place to have a backup for yourself. You can't be everything all the time. and not having the right people in place to at least help you run a business is a complete failure. It's really hard to have a life. It's really hard to do anything without partners and people working with you that are going to help pull weight. And so number two is just not having the right people around you. And that includes employees, hiring the wrong people, leaving them around too long to just sort of sit and not produce the way that you think they should be. Just being too patient, I think, can be a problem too.
That's one I've learned as well.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure there's more that'll come up, but those are a few of the glaring ones that right off the top of my head
really jump out as like, okay, gotta, yeah. And it's funny because like I said, I run into at least, now I've never done equity split. I've had people come to me for equity splits. My rule is always an equity split can be on the table after you've worked for me for a year. And you've shown me that you're going to put in the time, and then I'm happy you can work towards an equity split, but I'm not going to give you one. Just like I had one guy who literally our very first phone call was like, oh my gosh, we should be partners and we're going to do a 50-50 of your company. And I was like, what are you bringing to the table to get 50% of my company?
Yeah. And I hadn't read like 0 to 1 or any of the entrepreneurial books when I started my previous startup. And one of the things is definitely investing, like making sure everybody has the time to invest, because if I would have put that partner through a year of just testing to make sure that they were going to do what they said, it would have made a huge difference because it dropped off well before that. So investing is a huge thing.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Like as of right now, I still have 100% of the company. Doesn't mean I'll stay like that, but I do have people who are like, so, is equity on the table? I'm like, so, not right now. I don't know how this is like a common conversation for people to split equity so early in the business, but
yeah, exactly. Well, that's part of the game though. And so learning that, hopefully people can learn from conversations like this too. Don't do that. And everybody should have to wait, because you never know, life circumstances may get in the way. So it's not just somebody being a dud. It could be something happens and you would be better off with the company having that equity for investment or something else. And if you gave it away, you don't have it anymore. And buying it back is no fun.
No, it gets really expensive, really, really cripples cash flow sometimes.
I think another big one is everybody thinks you're going to be an entrepreneur. You're going to own your own business and you're going to be your own boss. That is so far from the truth. I can't even, please get that. That should just be completely out of the nomenclature of entrepreneurs. Your boss is your customer. That always will be. And you're not your own boss. You can maybe make your own hours, but you're going to have a lot more hours and there's a lot more at stake and you're going to feel more personally vested in it. And so people that think it's some kind of cakewalk or something, and I think this is starting to come out now. I think Elon Musk just said something about it recently, about what is the truth on Twitter behind entrepreneurship. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was, it's a lot of hardship and people need to be prepared for that too and not just give up.
Yeah, and I think there's too many people who, like, as far as I'm concerned, the American dream has kind of shifted from like, hey, 2 kids in a house and a car. What is it? 2.5 kids in a house.
2.5 kids, yeah.
Right. So I think it's shifted to like, oh, I get to, it's land of opportunity. I get to have my own business and I'm going to be a millionaire by age 25. And first of all, a million's not worth what a million used to be worth.
Sure.
Like, let's get that one out of the way too, because like I've met so many millionaires and I'm like, really? Okay. Yeah. And that was the first time where I was like, yeah, million's not the number.
I used to think about numbers like a million. And now when I think about that number, I'm like, well, how long does that cover payroll? Right? It's just not the same type of thing as it was. Definitely.
I was laughing because I was like, when we first calculated the valuation of my company, I was like, really? It's worth that much? It doesn't feel like it. I thought that it would be worth it. But I will say 3.5 years in, like last night I was journaling and I was like, I feel like I've finally reached, like I had that period of really, really, really striving. And I feel like I've finally reached a period where I love doing this. I'm not having to work as many hours, but it was 3.5 years of a lot of hours.
Yeah.
That we'll get past.
Yeah, definitely. And I think before people get past that point, a lot of people drop off. They give up because it's really hard. It's hard on your family. It's hard on you. You don't get any sleep sometimes, and so giving up, I think, is definitely one of the worst things you can do early on. There is a point at which you should say, this probably isn't going to work. I need to pivot. I need to do something. Everybody needs to get to that point too, but it's not within the first couple of years. Like, let it ride, do what you're doing, work really hard, and keep trying, because you push through things, and things change in a day. And I think that's another thing that people don't really like. The overnight success thing is only partially true. Overnight success after 7 years of trying. And things do change like that. That's how it works, but it takes that long to build that reputation or whatever to get there. So
I had one guy, he came on, he joked, he said, I'm a 24-year overnight success story.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds about right. I had a question I was going to ask, and then it jumped out of my head. Totally gone. All right. Well,
that's okay. I've already had that happen a couple of times too.
Yeah. Right. So, wow, I'm really trying hard because it was a really good question too. But at least let me ask this one. Although we've been going for about 12, 15 minutes here. So, what is better question before we go on to that last one that I always like to end with. You said one of the key things you learned was to keep the right team around you. This is something a lot of business owners struggle with. How did you solve that?
Time. So overworking, I've been an entrepreneur for 8 years. And over this time, I got to meet a lot of people. I've gotten to work with a lot of people. I've gotten to work with contractors. I've gotten to just meet a whole lot of really great people. And what I did with this business was I started pulling the best ones in first. And so that's how I solved the problem. I got to know who the best were over time and then stole them later. So I don't know how to do it faster than that. Get to know people, I guess, from my experience, get to know people really well. Work with people first, test them out, like on a contract basis. And then if you feel really comfortable with them, and bring them in. And I got to do this over the course of 2 separate businesses. So it was, I cheated, I guess, but it took a long time.
I think that's funny because that's kind of my theory on it too, is like, I see where a lot of businesses get into trouble when they suddenly have to hire 100 employees, overnight. And that all of a sudden quality dives, everything dives quick. And I've struggled a little bit because, I've looked at the business model and I'm like, we could be across the entire US by now. Like, we could be so much bigger if I would just, hire all these people who come to me wanting to work for me. Instead, I don't. I put people through a testing period first, and it makes for a really slow hiring process. But the people I've hired, we've lost 1 employee in 3.5 years.
Yeah. And employee retention is super important. And so if you have, you don't want a churn machine either. And also your customers are going to feel that, and that's no good. So I think it's more important to me. Like, our thing is always senior level, like quality people for what we're doing. You can get software developers anywhere. You can, hey, somebody's so-and-so's kid knows how to program PHP. Let me bring them into my startup. Like, that's fine unless you're building, something that's got to be a $10 million product in 6 months. You need people that are good at what they do, that are proven, that have proven results over their career. And so for us, that's what we do. And those are the only kind of people that I find and hire. I'm with you on that. Quality for me is way more important than quantity. I'd rather have quality, like 5 quality people than 20 quantity people programming, overseas or whatever, and getting garbage results back. I have to redo 5 times. No thanks.
Yeah, because I just think it drives up payroll. It drives up your time investment, because for every employee you bring on, you have to add some time investment. I would rather invest all my time in just a handful of really, really good people.
Yep, me too.
Remember my other question. So you got through, obviously you're past the at least the first 2 years of your business. How did you pull that off? Because there is that struggle time, that period where you're working ridiculous hours. How did you get to where you are now?
So lots of hard work brings in more and more work that you're not actually looking for. So you get referrals, you get, people saying, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this. So the more business that you do, the more people enjoy your work, the more people share what you do. And so that's been like super duper important for us, is just word of mouth and, in network sort of sharing. I think Chris had referred you to me. That's how we met. And Chris is somebody that I respect, and I've mentored at a 3-day startup. And so I think building a network is really important. And, one of our huge milestones this year was getting everybody health insurance. And like, I was super proud of being able to do that, you know?
Yeah,
And so
that's a chunk.
yeah. So, just little things like keeping everybody happy, keeping everybody working hard, which means that their results are better, which means that what people are seeing from their output is attracting more and more additional customers just in your network because of the fact that you're getting a lot of referrals. I think that's really helped.
Nice. Well, I will wrap up. I've actually managed to get a full page of notes. That's typically my indicator that we're at the 20-minute mark here.
Okay.
So what is your very best piece of advice you could give to another business owner who's out there struggling, needs some sort of motivation, needs something today to say, you know what, I still got this, needs something?
I'd say as long as you can feel the flow, don't give up. Like, stick with it. You'll push through the hard parts. If it seems like you're constantly paddling uphill, I'm talking for 2-3 years, it might be time to pivot. But if that's not the case, just keep pushing. You're going to push through the wall. You're going to make it to that next level. It's just a matter of time. It's physics, right? Just keep pushing.
Have you ever read The Dip by Seth Godin?
I have not, but actually I keep seeing it come up in my LinkedIn feed. I think it is.
So that's always, whenever I talk with someone who's at that tipping point, they're like, do I give up? Do I push through? I always say, you know what? That book is, by the time you finish that book, you'll know if it's time to give up or keep going.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. It's one of, I think I've got it behind me somewhere on the bookshelf, but it's super small, and it's a great little, basically says the same thing. Like, hey, you know, if the reward is still worth it, if you're still push through, and if it's not, then move on, but don't stick to something too long, and don't give up too soon.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fine balance.
Yeah, right. That's such a middle of the road way of putting it.
Yep.
So, well, cool. Well, this was really, really good. I really enjoyed our chat today. I think you and I have a lot of the same mindsets as far as business goes. I really had a lot of fun doing this.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Well, thanks, David. And for our listeners out there, this is the Business Owner Spotlight. This is bringing someone on that you may have never had the chance to sit and listen to, who has some incredible wisdom to share with you, other business owners. But the challenge of doing a Business Owner Spotlight is I need your help to find those people. I need to know, who do I put the spotlight on? So do me a favor. If you know who I should be reaching out to, go below, grab my contact information from below this video, and shoot me an email with their information. I would love to put the spotlight on them. In the meantime, you have got an amazing life ahead of you. I will encourage you to follow your dreams. Follow what it is you're pushing forward. Don't give up too soon, because it's time to stop just trying to hit the target. It's time to smash it. So get out there this week and smash some targets.
Thanks, Stephanie.